Good evening, esteemed members. On behalf of the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting, as its chairman, I welcome each and every one of you to this one more webcast of the committee, which is focusing and which always aims on ensuring that internal audit becomes one of the important areas of professional interest and opportunity for our members. Each week, we come with a new topic. We come with excellent speakers and moderators. Internal audit, as they say, is the sunrise of this profession. Going forward, internal audit will be one of the key areas of decision making for the management. It has always been, it will continue to be, and it will grow. We have here with us today CA Nilanjana Sen, who is a professional, a very esteemed professional who has come to our forum to talk on the best practices, the standards on internal audit. Madam, I sincerely thank you for sparing your valuable time. Heartiest welcome to you from the Institute and also from the committee. Thank you so much for being here and thank you so much for honoring us. The young chartered accountant CA Jasprit Kaur is going to be the moderator of this session. Best wishes to you. This is a platform which you don't get very easily. This is a platform which adds to your stature at all times. So I'm happy that a young person like you is here with us today to moderate this session. From the office, we have Arun Agarwal, who is one of the very important members of the staff that handles the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting. We have Ayaz, who is giving us technical support. Esteemed members, we in the Board of Internal Audit are coming out with various excellent publications for your use. We very recently came out with a publication on pharma industry. We have come out with a publication on concurrent audit, manual and concurrent audit, and our checklist on internal audit as a whole, the manual internal audit as a whole, is about to be released within a span of few days. All our publications are online and live. So in case any of you require any publication, you may download them. And one more request to you, please be connected with us in all matters concerning academics, because we always look out for speakers, we look out for authors, we look out for those who can review our publications, who can do any work on internal audit and management accounting. With this brief opening remarks, I now hand over this forum to the safe hands of CA Jasprit Kaur, who will take this forward. Welcome to each and every one of you, to our speaker, to our moderator, and all our audience. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I extend a heartfelt welcome to all our esteemed participants on this insightful webinar on standards on internal audit, codifying best practices organized by the Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting of ICAI. I would also like to thank CA Rajendra Kumar ji, Chairman of Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting, and CA Charanjot Singh Nanda ji in absentia, Vice Chairman of Board of Internal Audit and Management Accounting, and all the esteemed members of the board for organizing this webinar and enlightening us on this topic. I would also extend a warm welcome to our eminent speaker, CA Nilanjana Sen ji, for sharing her expertise on this topic. CA Nilanjana Sen ji is a commerce graduate and a qualified chartered accountant, practicing as a partner of Messrs. SBA Associates since 2005. Having an experience of 22 years in the field of assurances, corporates and banks, compliances in company law matters, risk-based audits, consultancy in accounting, direct taxation, GST, bank finance, and so on. She is also an empaneled resource person in GST with ICMAI and a peer reviewer. She has been also a co-opted member of Committee for Public Finance and Government Financial Management. Dear participants, before moving further, I would like to give a brief on today's topic, that is standards on internal audit. Friends, standards on internal audit provides guidance and standards for internal audit. These standards encompass various aspects of internal audit, including the purpose, scope, methods, documentation, and reporting of internal audit engagement. These standards are designed to ensure that internal audits are conducted effectively, independently, and in compliance with the relevant regulations promoting transparency and accountability within organizations. With this, I would request CN Alanjana Singh ji to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me. And I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Board of Internal Audits for inviting me out here and for giving me an opportunity to speak before you. Today's topic, I'll just share the screen and start sharing the screen. Just give me 1 sec. Okay, so today's topic will be on the 300 series of audit planning and so forth. So now, why are the standards required? As CA Jasprit has already said that these standards have been established to bring about a uniformity in the way in which we conduct our internal audits, thus ensuring that the way we conduct the audit is of utmost quality. It also gives guidance to the internal auditor to carry out his duties in the most effective and efficient manner. So we start with SAI 310, that is planning the internal audit assignment. Now, this is a topic with which we are accustomed or with which we are acclimatized right from our intermediate days. That is when we had subject of audit as a study material. So what is the need of again going through now the subject of audit planning? It is because now the standards have been brought into by the internal audit board to provide a very standardized way of conducting an audit. Now, who will conduct the audit? So, internal audits can be conducted in two ways. It can either be conducted in-house, in which at the helm is the chief internal auditor, or the internal audit can be assigned to an external agency, in which case a CA firm comes in and does the internal audit. But whosoever does the audit has first to prepare an audit plan. This audit plan has to be approved by the management, that is either the board of directors or the audit committee. Now, usually an audit plan is broken down into a number of subsets so that all the areas which forms the scope of the internal audit can be covered during the entire year. So it may be that the periodicity of the audit may be either monthly, quarterly, half yearly. Usually internal audit is carried out for this period. Now, so what happens is that why do we need an audit plan? First, when we get an appointment letter that we have been assigned the internal audit of a particular industry, we are very happy. Oh, we have already done the audit of so and so industry. So we already have an audit plan ready. And so we are just ready to jump the bandwagon with our resources. But what we have to keep in mind is that all the environment of the industry differs from one another. Guideline or the checklist which is available for that particular industry. But before taking the help of that particular checklist, what we need to do is we need to gather knowledge about the business environment. For that, what do we need to do? We need to speak with the management. We need to speak with the process owners. We need to speak with the departmental heads so that we get to know about the industry, the practices over there, the procedures being followed over there. So, what is the planning process? The planning process shall be in place which stipulates the essential inputs which we are going to gather by way of interacting with the management, steps to complete the planning, and the nature of output required to conduct a comprehensive planning exercise. For example, we know that in a government organization, in a process of procurement, there is a tendering process, and we know what are the steps in the tender required. Now, what we do not know is that the tendering process might be different from organization to organization. If a particular industry or a particular company might go in usually nowadays for e-tender. Some of the organization still are following the manual way of dropping the tenders in the tender box. So before we start planning the audit, before we start planning a particular process, we need to know the practice that is being followed out in that particular company. Another thing which we need to keep in mind is the legal and the regulatory requirement, which usually is followed by the company. Suppose there is a sudden change in the GST rules which affects that company. So now, whatever we knew about that particular provision applicable to another industry might not be applicable over here. So before we start the planning process, it is important that we get acclimatized with the different processes, with the different standards, with the different procedures being followed in that particular company of which we are going to carry out the internal audit. So, discussion with the management. Their inputs are critical in understanding the intricacies of the assignment, in identification of matters of relevance, and to align the stakeholder expectations with further objective. So, since nowadays we are moved into a risk-based auditing environment, in most cases it is important that we do a risk assessment ourselves. So how do we go about it? First of all, the best way and the best process is to do a walkthrough. And how do we do a walkthrough? First, we sit with the process owners, we sit with the departmental heads, we note down how the particular practice is being followed in that company. We try to assess the risk over there so that we can identify the areas of high risk in which we need to focus more. Based on this exercise, now if there is any risk which is initially we perceive as existing, we try to look in for the risk mitigating factors. This is again a process in which we have to do by speaking to the process owners. And it may so happen that we may also take the help of any previous risk assessment audit done by the industry as a basic, you may say, guiding factor, and we may get an insight into the areas which may have already been identified as high risk. But nevertheless, we cannot start a planning process unless we do a risk assessment of that particular process by ourselves. Now, what is the audit methodology and the depth of coverage? Now, depth of coverage will depend upon a risk assessment. So, once an area is identified as risky, we shall naturally have to do or have to devote more time to that particular area. For example, suppose we have been assigned the internal audit of a large printing industry. And there are plates used in that industry in which impressions are recorded. And we see that the plates are left loose out in the open yard. And so that itself triggers that the stock, that the way the plates are kept over there, the way the plates are stored itself is a risky proposition. So initially we mark that area as a high risk and we make a noting that we have to deploy more resources over there. So the depth of coverage shall go beyond basic compliances and it could be expanded. So how? Application of a basic process review methodology, which tests the design and operating efficiency of internal controls, questions the process design, and explores better and more efficient way of transaction processing. So in this, the first step will be to go through the process in which the plates are received, they are procured, they are received, they are stored, and they are issued to a particular job. Unless and until we get to know the process view from the process owners, how it happens, we just cannot, be guided by a basic checklist by what we have done either in a similar industry or what is available as a it is available readily available to us. So basically this thing we have to keep in mind, the risk assessment basically has to be undertaken for each and every company before we start the planning process. Deploying a risk-based process review methodology, which helps to link the internal controls to particular vulnerabilities, evaluate the effectiveness of internal controls, and even question the process in place and help identify alternative mitigations. So now another example following the very topic of this issue of plates. Suppose now this printing industry has 3 factory locations in different parts of the same state. Now what happens is that printing is taking place in all the 3 units. Plates are being issued in all the 3 units. So we have conducted a study of the process of plates issue and consumption, suppose in one of the factory unit 1. We just cannot assume that the same practice is being followed in the other 2 factories also. So first, what do we have to do? We have to see whether the company has an audit manual, whether it has a laid down SOP, or whether everything is just by way of a practice, the way the things are, the way the processes are carried out. So before we come to a conclusion that the internal controls in this area is working effectively or not, what do we need to do? We need to deploy resources. We need to deploy resources in all the 3 units, study the process of procedure that is going on in all the 3 units separately. If there is a laid down process or if there is a laid down SOP, we need to see whether those SOPs are being followed consistently or whether there is a deviation for any of those SOP or practices which are laid down, and hence then presents a flag, then presents a loophole in the internal control which might exist and which may then we need to highlight to the management. So in that case, what do we need to do? We need to see whether any alternative mitigating risk actions are present or not. So now entity level control review methodology can be employed to provide a more holistic evaluation of the governance process, such as organization culture, organization structure, oversight mechanisms, and performance measurement. Now, so what are the requirements of planning process? So first, what do we need to do? First is the understanding of the environment of the particular company or the particular organization. If we say that we are going to carry out the internal audit for, we carry out a risk assessment by doing a walkthrough after getting to know the practice that is being followed, by speaking to the process owners and by taking down notes. Next comes the most important part, that is, which is going to help us in planning, that is resource allocation and technology deployment. Now, resource allocation is very important because we may prepare an audit plan, but if we are not equipped with the right resources, the plan might not work out effectively. So, after making a plan, we need to, after chalking out a work schedule, the time schedule required to carry out each audit process, we have to see what type of resources that particular area or that particular process requires. So, before we allocate a resource, we need to see his experience and we need to see what type of knowledge, what type of competency that particular resource possesses before we know that he will be able to effectively discharge his duties. Because unless and until he can effectively discharge his duties, the time schedule which we had initially thought of while we are making the plan, we might not make it within that time frame. So, resource allocation is of utmost importance. Also, areas which I've identified as high risk areas, we need to focus more. So, we need to put more resources to it. Next comes technology deployment. Now, nowadays, gone are the days when, when we just go to do the audit by just simple, vouching and doing a transaction audit. Gone are those days. Nowadays, the internal audit is focused more on internal controls. What are the internal controls existing? Whether they are functioning effectively or not. So, for that, we need to take the help of technology. So, we need to know what type of audit, what type of technology that particular auditee is deploying, whether all the transactions are getting routed through that particular software which the organization is using. And from the auditor's point of view, what we need to know, we need to deploy the IT tools. In this case, Excel is a very, very handy tool with a lot of features when it comes to auditing. And what we usually do, we ask the auditor to present us with the data dump, and we then do a data mining and we carry out analysis, and then we come out with results. And some areas of internal control lapses might get highlighted while we do the data mining and data analysis. Now, over here in technology deployment, one thing which is to be kept in mind is the access which, as an auditor, we can have to the auditee's records. It may so happen that the organization, first of all, may give only a viewing mode to the auditor. That is okay. But it may so happens, even in the viewing mode, you, the auditor, does not have access to all the modules which he is supposed to cover, all the processes which he is supposed to cover in his internal audit. Okay, so it might be that, for example, that the work in process, which we can get on the MIS report of a work in process in a particular industry, in a particular manufacturing industry, which we might get as a report, might not be available to us by just downloading it is in the way of an MIS. It may so happen that the management, what does it do? It can download it and it presents that same work in progress data in an Excel to us. So we need to ensure that the data that is being provided to us for carrying out the internal audit is not manipulated, is not half baked. I wouldn't say manipulated. I don't want to use the word manipulated, but it might be that certain data is not being shown to us. So we as an auditor need to ensure this right at the planning process, that we are given access to all the areas of which we are supposed to carry out the audit. So audit plan is prepared when? It is prepared usually at the beginning of the year. The scope is decided then, the areas are decided then, and it may so happen that we, in a large organization, it is not possible to cover all the areas in one go. So what happens? The audit plan is broken down into subsets so that some of the areas, get audited during each quarter or in a half yearly or in a whatever time period, excuse me, is decided in conjunction with the management. So what we need is that the resource allocation and technology deployment, these are the two tools which are going to help us in an effective planning of internal audit. So now, once an audit plan is ready, we cannot say that the audit plan is a foolproof plan, because audit plan, we have to modify it, keep on fine tuning it as we further delve into the audit process. So now what we have an audit plan. The audit plan must be documented. Next we come is the internal audit evidence. Now what is internal audit evidence? It is basically a collation of all the information
Well, I guess there is some technical issue. Okay. Participants were trying to connect with the speaker. She will rejoin soon. Ma'am, you can continue with the session.
Yeah, I just got disconnected. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, ma'am, you're audible.
Just share the. So, okay, so we were discussing the internal audit evidence. So now we have in front of us ready an audit plan. So audit plan can be in the form of a checklist prepared on the basis of information which we had gathered by conducting meetings, by inputs of the various stakeholders, by carrying out the risk assessment, by seeing the risk mitigation factors available. And what is more important is that that plan has been discussed with the management and it has been approved by them. So once a plan, internal audit plan is in place, the next step is we have an internal audit evidence. We now actually start the audit process. So what is actually audit evidence? It is a collation of information used by the internal auditor in arriving at the conclusions on which the auditor's opinion is based. So one thing which we have to keep in mind is that the evidence need to stand on its own. That is, it should be self-explanatory, because when the culmination of an audit is in its audit report. So now what happens is that it may so happen, we may point out a particular area in which we have observed a lapse in internal control. And then the management, what they do, they ask us naturally for evidence. And then the evidence which we produce before them is not self-explanatory. For example, it may so happen that in an organization which issues thousands of work orders, there might be some work orders, purchase orders, which are lying open for more than a year. So naturally, that itself is a very, very risky internal control. That's a lapse on internal control. Now we need to delve into the reason why. Not as an auditor, it is the work of the management. They have to go into the reason why, but it is the auditor's duty to point out that those purchase orders or work orders open for more than 1 year. Now, if as an auditor, we just place before the management the aging of the work orders or the only the quantity of the work orders which are open, it just is does not serve any purpose, because as a layman, the management will want to naturally know what are the type of work orders that have remained open, which are the parties on which the work orders have been issued, which are lying open. So naturally, when we collect an audit evidence, it should stand on its own. That is, it should be self-explanatory. So whenever we are gathering audit evidence, we need to gather all the information so that it is in place, so that when any of these issues come up before the management for discussion, the audit evidence is there on which we can say that there is a lack of internal control. And another type of evidence which we gather is from the performance of various audit activities and the testing procedures. Next is that, so what are the objectives of the internal audit evidence? To confirm the nature, the timing, and the sufficiency of the audit procedure undertaken as per the internal audit plan and terms of engagement. For example, timing and sufficiency of the internal audit procedure is very, very important, because it may so happen that when we are looking for evidence, means what? We are actually going through the transactions, we are actually might be going through the underlying records, and for that we have to go to the process owners. So it may so happen that the process owners, may say that, and we want, suppose as an evidence, we want a particular agreement of a bank loan from them. So they might say us, no, please come after 1 day, we will give it to you. So what happens is that factor we have not at all taken considered while preparing the audit plan. So now what happens? The timing or the work schedule which we had originally planned while drafting the audit plan, now we need to review it. So that particular process may get delayed because the process owners have now delayed it. So this confirming the nature, the timing and sufficiency of the audit procedures is very, very important. Next is the audit evidence aids in the supervision and review of the internal audit work. Now, how is that? Review and supervision itself will form a separate SIA, but shortly, in very short, if I say that once we start gathering evidence, our team, the resources deployed, starts gathering evidence, they will do it according to their own knowledge. So we need to do a timely supervision. We need to do a review whether those evidences that they are gathering are properly documented and whether they serve the purpose or whether they need to be more elaborative, and to establish that the work performed is in conformance with the applicable pronouncements of the ICI. So, what are the requirements of the SIA? That is the nature of evidence. So, evidence can be collected from within the company, from the underlying company's books and records, systems, processes, or through the performance of audit activities and testing procedures, like we go through the bills and invoices, we go through contracts, agreements, like this. Now, evidences for the latter are collected by performing one or more of the following audit procedures: by checking, inspection, observation, inquiry, confirmation, computation. Now, checking and inspection forms a very, very vital part while collection of evidence, especially when there is some physical verification going on. Now, what happens is that suppose when we are carrying out, say, physical verification of inventory as a part of the internal audit, we want to point out the slow moving inventory and the obsolete inventory. So in this case, the checking, inspection, observation part becomes very, very vital. We what do? We go about for carrying out the inspection with a already inventory list which is available with the management. We try to see whether those inventory, as have been stated by the management, in good condition exist or not, whether their security, whether they have proper security or not. Now, what do? We go and find that in big those inventory might be lying in the open yard, and there is some mud and even trees have come up on them, and those inventories have been marked as good. So now what? Now we need to do an inquiry, because since those inventories have been shown as good by the management, we now need to do an inquiry for how long those stock are lying like this, from the process owner or the departmental head, that is maybe the store manager. Confirmation. Yes, this stock is lying like this in this position for a long time, for how many period. So computation, again we need to go back to the management, we need to give them a report on what our preliminary observation, and we need to do a reperformance if necessary, and in many cases using the help of the experts. So this is the nature of evidence which we might gather. Now, sufficiency and appropriateness are interrelated and apply to the evidence obtained. Now, what is sufficiency? Sufficiency will refer to the quantity of evidence that we may take to arrive at the conclusion. And appropriateness is what? Appropriateness refers to the quality of the audit evidence that we take. Now, so sufficiency refers to the quantum of evidence and appropriateness relates to the quality. Normally, the internal audit evidence is persuasive on its own, and the number of evidential matters in aggregate, which makes it conclusive in nature. Now, for example, if we try to give an example of evidence which we have gathered in-house. Suppose by speaking, suppose in the process of capitalization, say capitalization of capital goods, there is a process. First, the goods will lie in the CWIP for some time in, say, large projects. Suppose the goods are lying in CWIP for a particular period of time before they get capitalized. Now we want to know what is the method of capitalization that is getting followed, because in many cases, except the small capital goods where large complex capital goods are involved in a manufacturing industry, we might not be technically competent to ascertain whether a particular project has got completed or not before it gets capitalized. So in that case, by speaking to the process owners, we might try to gather evidence of how the CWIP gets converted into capital goods. So it might happen, or we have come across instances like this, like when we had gone for auditing in a particular organization. After speaking to the person in the accounts department, we got to know that, we just capitalize. We do not capitalize. The engineering department itself capitalizes them. So, we were a little taken aback on hearing that. So then we decided to cross-check that by going to the engineering department. So now they said, no. We just send them a mail to the accounts department and then they do the capitalization. Okay. Now, what happens? Now, they say that in some cases, we issue a completion certificate also. So now see, we have 3 stages of evidence. We have an email and we have a completion certificate by the user department before it goes to the accounts department where they are supposed to do the capitalization, and in which case they have told us that they do not do the capitalization at all. So in such cases of contradictory information by the process owners, what do we have to do before we can rely on such evidence? We have to go through all the process owners or the user departments involved, speak to them, get the documents on which the things happen, and then we can come and arrive to make the evidence conclusive in nature. So that is the nature of evidence. So evidence, we already know that internal evidence can be there, external evidence can be there, and external evidence is always more, we can rely more on the external evidence than the internal evidence. Now, reliability and consistency of the evidence. The reliability of the audit evidence depends on its source, whether it is internal or external, and its thoroughness may also depend upon the timing of the audit procedures. So when the internal auditor has doubts about the reliability of the information collected or which is inconsistent with that obtained from another, the internal auditor shall evaluate how the audit procedure need to be modified or expanded to resolve the doubt or the conflict. So, for example, again, if we come back to this, say, we may have grants, an organization receiving grants. So now, what is the process? What is the treatment of the grants? We need to see whether those grants, as a part of internal audit, we need to see whether they have been correctly accounted for also. So now, as a basis of evidence, we need to actually obtain the grant papers, the government orders or the orders on which grants have been received, and then go through the terms and satisfy ourselves that yes, these are the terms on which the grants have been received and they have been correctly accounted for. So reliability and consistency of evidence. So evidence can never be taken on word of mouth by the process owners or the user departments. It always has to be corroborated by some documents. So, and evidence should be consistent in nature. So whenever there is a deviation in consistency, we have to gather more evidence. Now, evidence collection and recording process. All evidence shall be collected and recorded in a manner that it can be reproduced in a digital form and reviewed independently of the internal auditors. It shall meet certain basic standards of quality to achieve internal audit objectives. Now, one thing what we need to keep in mind is that evidence, if it is in a digital form, it can be reproduced. Now, what happens if the evidence which we had gathered from a record can be wiped out? Can it be done? Yes, we have come across such instances also. So, for example, what happened is that we were going through attendance registers. So attendance of the factory workers were getting recorded over there, and we found that some ghost factory workers were there who actually did not work but were receiving the payments. So now what happened when we highlighted this fact to the management? They naturally asked us for evidence on what basis we were saying. So we said that we had gone through the attendance register at the gate and we had taken up instances from there. So those registers were called for. And when those registers came before us, it had no record whatsoever of those ghost workers. Now, what happened was that before we had written down those instances, we had taken a image of that attendance register for a record from which we had reproduced them in the report. So luckily we had that in a digital form with us and we could show it to the management. So evidence shall be recorded in a manner that it can be reproduced even in a digital form and reviewed independently of the internal auditor. So it shall meet certain basic standards of quality to achieve internal audit objectives. Details of these quality standards, the manner in which audit evidence shall be gathered, reviewed, or sufficiency and appropriateness, validated for authenticity and reliability, and stored as a part of the internal audit documentation shall be written in the form of an internal audit process or internal audit manual. So, evidences should be written, they should be reviewed, they should be documented, and they should be stored. So, this goes the evidence collection and the recording process. Now, documentation. To confirm the compliance of an audit procedure, the list of documents required is as follows. Written policy and process evidence as part of the internal audit manual, details of the evidence collected, the audit findings and the opinion being cross-referenced to the internal audit where appropriate. Now, if we link this audit evidence to audit plan, what do we need to do? First is the audit plan. We detail out the areas in which we are gathering the evidence. Evidence may be in the form of a digital form. It can be in the recording of our transactions. So then it should be linked to that particular area, so that whenever anyone who questions us, since ultimately all evidences or all deviations will be reported on or will be discussed with the management for further action, we need to link that particular evidence with that particular area of the audit plan. This is very, very important. And another thing which we need to do is that once the evidence is collected, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be reviewed by the engagement partner, or if not by the engagement partner, by one level up by a person than the resources who have been deployed to carry out the actual internal audit. So that is about internal evidence. So Why is audit evidence important? So, audit evidence is one thing which can save the auditors if they are ever accused of a negligence in their duties. Another small example from my real life practice is that during the concurrent audit of a bank, we had identified an area of gross irregularities, or to say more, where fraud had taken place. So, naturally, as internal auditors, we were the first persons, to put the blame on. Oh, there is an internal concurrent auditor, and he could not point it out on a timely basis, so that we can bring it to our notice, so that if it had so happened that fraud could have been avoided. So naturally, it is an area of gross negligence being reported on the part of the auditor, and since it is a fraud, nowadays it is very, very stringent. So now, how did we save ourselves? So audit evidence and our working papers saved us, because we had a working papers in place, which we are going to see later on in documentation, and the audit evidence which we had documented over there had ultimately saved us. So audit evidence plays a vital role in auditing, because it will help us in arriving at the conclusion from carrying out our audit procedures, allowing the auditors to justify their conclusions effectively, and the opinions expressed by the auditors in their audit reports rely heavily on the quality of evidence that they have gathered. Moreover, should any disputes arise regarding the audit findings, the auditors depend upon the strength and credibility of the audit evidence to substantiate their stance. The example which I had given earlier, citing the factory workers' attendance, these are all live examples which through and through I have, let's say that through all my professional practice, I have come across such instances. So, public traded companies must undergo an audit of their financial statements to investors every year. These statements contain an enormous amount of information that investors use to decide whether to commit their money. So, the accuracy of this financial statement is a higher priority. So, now we are going into the financial transaction part also. So, as an internal auditor, apart from the statutory auditor, because the statutory auditor usually what does he do? He will place this reliance on the internal auditor's report also. So, first, the internal auditors are placed with the utmost responsibility of seeing that the financial statements or the financial transactions that get reflected or recorded in the financial statements are free from any irregularities or misstatements. For the audit opinion, now another small example, because unless and until some small instances are given, it will make things more clear. Now, as a part of internal audit, we were reporting in an organization, certain credits in the bank, which remained as a BRS item, although for a number of years, although the parties who had made those payments were identified. So, we used to keep on reporting. So now what happened is that one, the statutory auditors came in and they took the internal auditor's report, and that particular transaction which we had kept on reporting, they had taken up over there. And then ultimately what happened is that it got reflected to the CAG also. So the accuracy of the financial statement is a high priority, whether all the transactions are getting recorded in a timely manner, proper manner, so that there is no window dressing of the financial statements. Now, for the audit opinion to be credible, the company's claims about its financial performance must be corroborated either by external evidence, we know bank statement. In the case of investments, we have to take the actual physical scripts of those physical investments, and nowadays in case of demats, we take the demat statements, or through an analysis conducted by the auditors. By exercising the professional judgment, experienced auditors assure the accuracy of the information provided by the company. Now, professional judgment. So now how much evidence should be collected in a particular area will now depend upon the professional judgment of the auditor also. So what do? Audit evidence. We are carrying out the audit of a particular area. We are taking evidence. We are getting reviewed. We have done the risk assessment. And if we find any control lapse, and if there is find any lapse in the internal control, so more evidence has to be collected so that the gravity of the situation might be reflected. So the gravity of the situation is reflected and it is brought to the notice of the management for their action. So how is the audit evidence obtained? We have already discussed this, so we'll just go through quickly that there are 7 types of audit procedure, and the purpose of the procedure typically dictates which one is used. So inspection, auditors collect evidence by inspection of the physical assets, the records, and the documents. In this case, we have to ensure that the documents are complete, which are being produced before us. The records are free from any material misstatement, which are being produced before us. It is not that half of the records are produced before us, and based on that, we prepare a report, and so that when it is discussed in front of the management, the process owners come with another bunch of records and say, see, this is the situation, so the auditors have not reported it correctly. So inspection of the reports of the documents, we should ensure that those are complete in all respects. Observation. Auditors observe the client's business, processes, and operations to identify deficiencies. We should always corroborate the what the process owners are saying by observation of the practices that are being followed by doing a walkthrough, and not only take their word of mouth as the ultimate note, because when they are explaining the process, we are just noting it down. We do need to do a walkthrough of that. We need to observe the practices that are actually being followed to get a better understanding of it and to identify the areas in which some more evidence will be required. Inquiry. Auditors talk with the client's senior management to gain a deeper understanding of the business processes for the auditing process. Inquiry alone is not considered sufficient audit evidence to reduce the risk. So inquiry must always be followed by documents, documentary evidence. External confirmation. This involves obtaining written or oral responses directly from the third parties, such as the customers, the suppliers, or the financial institutions. Now, it may so happen that a particular data is lying. When we are doing an aging analysis, we want to report to the management that this particular data is lying for so long, you're not getting any money from it. What are the recovery procedures that you are following to recover that amount? And we have to ask for an external confirmation from the particular data. We might insist upon that if the amount is material, because it may so happen that the amount had already been received by the company and has been not recorded correctly. So external confirmation in such cases will give a more corroborative evidence. Recalculation. Auditors perform calculations to verify that the final account balances match those reported by the client. The various ratios, which we nowadays compute as an internal auditor, also to calculate the trends, whether there is an increase in sales and whether sales vis-a-vis debtors is okay, and all these ratios, whether they give a consistent result or if there is any inconsistency in those ratios. So wherever there is an inconsistency in these ratios, those are the areas which need to be focused more. More audit evidence has to be gathered from those areas. Reperformance. The auditor independently performs procedures or controls that were originally performed by the entity to verify their effectiveness. This is very, very important in case of large machineries, where we find that the management reports as it is a good machinery, it is a good stock, it will be used, and we have on the initial inspection and observation, we find that it is the stocks are not going to be inventory, is not in a usable position. So what happens, we do a reperformance, we do a performance of those independently, so that we gather more evidence and we present it to the management. Analytical procedures. Now, auditor analyzes the financial and the non-financial data, such as comparing the current and the prior financial ratios or trends to identify unusual fluctuations or patterns that may indicate potential errors. So these are the various ways in which audit evidence can be obtained. So this we have already covered. Now, next we come to documentation, which is very, very important, because as mid-sized firms, we are very good in auditing, we are very good in preparing the audit program, the audit plan, and we have deployed the resources, they are gathering the evidences, everything is in place. Now when it comes to documentation, we find that half of the work which we have prepared as an internal auditor has not been documented properly, have not been written properly. So documentation plays a very, very important factor. Why? Because it validates the audit findings and supports the basis on which audit observations are made and conclusions reached from these findings. So we have gathered the evidence, but we have not written it down. We have not either put it in a paper format, or just, we have just clicked the pictures. Nowadays, we are all equipped with a camera, mobile phones. We have just clicked the photos of the irregularities and we have kept it with us. And when the engagement partner goes for reviewing and the resource person says, we have come across such deficiencies in such areas. So I go and I ask for, okay, show me your report. Where have you written it down in your working paper? And the working paper is blank. Oh, we have it in a mobile phone. Now, we as an auditor, we have to put it down. We have to convey this to our audit team that please, whatever evidence you have gathered, properly document it so that it can be linked to that particular process. Because unless and until the evidences are documented, we cannot draw conclusions from it. So, the objective of preparing complete and sufficient audit documentation is validate the audit findings and support the basis on which audit observations are made and conclusions reached from those findings. Aid in the supervision and review of the internal audit work, and establish that the work is performed in conformance with the applicable pronouncements of the ICAI. So, evidence obtained should be documented and cross-referenced to the internal audit program. So now, what are the nature of documentation? It includes written records, that is electronic or otherwise, of various audit activities and procedures conducted, including evidence gathered, information collected, the notes taken, the various meetings which we have held with the process owners. It includes internal memorandum. It includes letters of confirmation, representation, checklist, and so on. Now, abstracts or copies of the entity's records, significant and specific contracts and agreements may be included as part of the internal audit documentation if and where appropriate. So now, how much of documents should we collect as internal audit evidence? So then, we will have such a big fat file. So nowadays, when we are, being paperless, storing everything in the cloud, collect all the evidences and you document and put it on the cloud. So it is of utmost important how much documentation, how much evidence should be documented, how much of the evidences should be collected. So it is not worthy that each and every document which we come across, we ask for a copy of it from our auditee and we retain it as audit evidence. No. So how much audit documentation should be written, how much should be gathered, will again depend upon the professional judgment of the auditor. Now, these documents need not necessarily be printed in paper, and it can be taken in soft electronic digital version and it may be filed. So whatever alternative method of recording and storage is used, it must be reproducible in print form is required, similar to the original documents. And what we need to understand is this: wherever a document is there in a soft copy, it can be retrieved in a timely manner. So, timely completion of documentation. Now, all the audit working papers shall be compiled into internal audit files soon after completion of all the audit procedures. So, before preparing the draft report, ideally all the documentation should be completed. So, all the pending matters may be closed during the draft stage of the internal auditing, because the final internal audit report shall not be released unless all significant audit evidence have been collected and documented, so that whenever, suppose we are before the audit committee and there is a discussion going on a particular area which we have highlighted, which warrants attention of the management, and they say that whatever, show me the evidence you have. So in that particular case, sufficient documentation should be there. Sufficient documentation should be recorded or stored in a manner in which it can be retrieved and it can be shown to them. And the administrative process of arranging the final audit files shall be completed within 60 days of the release of the final report. Now, sufficiency of documentation. So the context and the extent of documentation is a matter of professional judgment, since it is neither practical nor necessary to document every matter of observation, as I have already said. Nevertheless, the document shall be sufficient and complete to avoid the need for a follow-up inquiry. What is that? We have given an observation, we are discussing it. Okay, management says, okay, show me the evidence on which you have reported. And at that particular time, we do not have the document on which we have given our audit observation. So no, it should be complete, so that if there is a follow-up inquiry, we can produce it before the management. Useful and relevant to the objectives of the audit procedure. Now, it is not necessary, when suppose a very simple thing, bank reconciliation statements, and an organization has said 24 banks, and it is just not worthy that we take the copies of all the 24 bank reconciliation statements, because it is only going to add to the volume of the file and nothing more, only to the volume of the audit file. So what do? We put a reference, we obtain the bank statements, we see that the closing balance is tallied, we see that the bank reconciliation statement has been prepared, documented, and that is it. So unnecessary documents just by collecting it and showing it to the reviewing partner, the resource, that yes, we have so much gathered so much documentation as an audit evidence. No need to do that. Undergo at least one level of review or approval. As I've already said, that one level up the resources who are actually doing the audit work has to be there to guide them that evidence, whatever has been collected, is proper, is sufficient in quantity, and the same has been properly documented. And dependable and reliable to allow a peer reviewer to reach the same conclusion. This is very, very important because this is a lapse on most of our part that everything is in order, but when we are subject to peer review, when a peer reviewer comes and he asks us to produce certain documents, we open the particular audit file and we see that that particular document which the peer reviewer is asking is not present. So we have to put ourselves in the shoes of the peer reviewer before completing the documentation of a particular audit. Excuse me. So, internal audit documentation shall be collated and arranged logically in files as audit work papers and retained to support the performance of the internal audit as a written process. Now, so what are the checks which I have to see before saying that the audit has been completed for that particular area? Check of completeness. That is, all the working papers are over there. Check of relevance. Cross-reference to the findings and the report. So we can take the help of the templates which are available with the institute also as a statutory auditor and modify it and use it as an internal audit and start using that as a check of relevance, that is cross-reference to the findings and the reports. Check of confirmation to the standards of internal audit. This is very, very important for our peer review also, because as I already said that whenever we are completing an audit file, we have to see that all the documents are there following the standards of internal auditing, which a peer reviewer is going to come and review so that that file is already ready and that we can say that while conducting the internal audit, we have conformed to the standards as given by the institute. All working papers shall be retained in accordance with the legal and the company's retention policy and only shared with those who are authorized to access them. So now, who is the owner of the working papers? Usually, the auditors are the owners of the working papers. Now, where there is a chief internal auditor and we have been appointed as an external agency, it may happen that we produce a report to him. So in that case, the chief internal auditor may only ask for certain working papers to know whether we have arrived correctly at a conclusion or not. But in this case, he cannot retain those working papers with him. So the ownership of the working papers initially lies with the auditors. Now, advice of the legal counsel or approval of senior management or engaging authority shall be obtained prior to releasing any audit documentation to external parties. So now, as an internal auditor, we can share our report with the statutory auditor because the statutory auditor usually comes and asks for the internal reports, internal audit report of the organization, but they just cannot come and ask for the working papers of the internal auditor. So it may so happen that a particular area, the internal auditor has certain working papers, they have certain agreements with them, and the statutory auditors wants access to this working papers. No, we cannot share it unless and until we have obtained the permission of the management. So next is review and audit assignments. Now see, in the standard, in the entire 300 series, all the steps are interlinked. So first we had the plan. Then, as we went about doing the audit, we gathered evidence. Then we documented those evidences. We written them as working papers. And now it is time for a review and supervision of audit assignment, because initially when an audit plan is made at the inception, at the start of the audit, during the performance of the audit, it is usually seen that it requires a lot of fine tuning depending upon our audit and observation. So, the objectives of review and supervision of audit assignments are to confirm and update the audit assignment plan, including the planned audit procedure and the adequacy of the resources allocated. So, initially, what we thought that the type of resources we were deploying to get a particular area audited might not be sufficient, though some areas might be there which may require more expertise, or some areas might be highlighted, where more resources need to be deployed. So that will depend upon our review and supervision. So initially this will come out from the supervision of the audit assignment, because what is supervision? It is a continuing monitoring. So evaluate the procedures undertaken, evidence collected, proper documentation and conclusions drawn by the audit staff. So timely completion of the audit plan, for adherence to the timelines, it is very important that continuous supervision be undertaken, so that we know that the resources are doing their work properly. Wherever warranted, we are to give them the necessary guidance so that we can complete the audit within the proper time and in a quality manner. Help formulate the audit observations and draft the internal audit report. So, since the audit observations form the basis of the conclusions that on the basis of which we are going to draft the internal audit report, it is very important that continuous supervision be made. Establish that work performed is in conformance with the applicable pronouncements of the ICAI. So, what is the nature and review or supervision? What is the extent of review and supervision? So, the extent of review and supervision, it will vary from assignment to assignment. There is no proper guideline, or there is no proper yardstick. So it will depend upon the scope of the assignment. If it is a new assignment, naturally more supervision will be required. Suppose we are doing internal audit of an organization for 2 years or 3 years. By this time, we are already acclimatized with the various procedures. So naturally, the time to be devoted for the supervision will be narrowed down. Its complexity. In complex areas, it may so happen that the engagement partners needs to devote his or her time instead of depending solely on the resources. Extent of automation. This is very, very important, extent of automation, because it may so happen that we are not given access to some parts, of the transactions, some parts of the module. Suppose it may so happen that the SAP is there in the company, a SAP is there in an organization, and in the SAP, in the procurement module, and the software, and a separate software is being used to record the liability. It may so happen. And between these two, the SAP in which the procurement orders are issued and the software in which the liability of the vendors are recorded, there is no interface between them. So it is very important to know to what extent of automation is there, and accordingly we will be able to take a decision depending upon that, how much supervision will be required over there, and the competency of the staff performing the audit. Nevertheless, It covers all audit activities such as audit planning, sampling. Sampling will again depend upon your risk assessment, audit testing procedures, collecting evidence, documentation, and using the work of an expert wherever warranted, and concluding audit observations in accordance with the pronouncements of the ICAI. Now, using the work of an expert during an internal audit becomes of utmost importance when there are certain legal or technical issues involved, of which we might not possess the particular expertise, and we need to engage. We need to engage or use the work of an expert in that. Because it may so happen that we are only relying on the report and we cannot ask for the working papers from that particular expert. Now, working papers prepared by the internal audit staff shall be reviewed at least one level up to ensure its completion and in accordance with the audit plan and objectives. So, supervision is an ongoing process, as I've already said. And what is reviewing? Reviewing is usually undertaken post completion of the work. So, the reviewer and the supervisor shall ensure that the audit work is executed in accordance with the audit program and audit procedures, are completed timely and effectively to achieve the overall objectives of the audit assignment. There is no time overrun because the periodicity of the audits are usually prefixed at the end of which we have to issue an audit report to the management. A review may indicate the need for additional or alternate audit procedures, which shall be performed, duly documented, and communicated to the appropriate authority. Now, review and supervision of the documentation. So, the extent of documentation reviewed is based on the professional judgment of the reviewer and include the name of the preparer, which is very important because later on, if something happens and we are to know who had done that particular area of work, we won't be able to pinpoint unless and until we have documented the name of the preparer. Date of preparation, again of very vital importance because the date on which the irregularity was reported might be rectified later on before the report got finalized. So, the name of the preparer, the date of the preparation is of utmost importance. Relevance and reliability of audit evidence. Now, relevance and reliability. Suppose we are doing a audit for this December quarter. So, and we gather as evidence some instances from the beginning of the year, which is in April. So, naturally, those observations will not hold good at this point. So, the relevance and reliability of the audit evidence is very, very important. Conclusions formed, audit observations drafted, and then the sufficiency of documents, etc. The adequacy of the documentation is tested on the basis of the requirement of the applicable standards on internal audit. So now, what is documentation? To conform to the requirements, the following documentation shall be maintained. Process documentation on review and supervision as part of the internal audit manual, and documentation indicating the signature and date of review undertaken on the working papers, the follow-up points raised, and minutes of any review meetings held with the audit team. Now, follow-up points raised is of utmost importance, as we shall see later on, because in some cases there might be persistent irregularities. So those points which keep on, always getting highlighted in the internal audit reports, and which warrants the action, some action on the management's part, but no action is taken by the management, and they keep on appearing as some weaknesses in internal control. So documentation is of utmost importance. Another example of a follow-up point is that it may so happen that we have put on paper, we have put up in a report a particular point. For example, there is a delay in the recording of the goods receipt note of the materials. And the delay is appearing in a consistent manner. In every month, it is appearing from the samples which we collect as evidence. So now, since it is a point which is appearing in every report, the management might ask the internal auditor that, okay, you are highlighting this in your every report, so we will take action. But for the time being, you can drop these points from your internal audit report. You can issue a separate management letter citing this, but don't feature it in your internal audit report. So now, should we do that? Because the management is asking us verbally to drop those persistent irregularity points. So once we remove them from the audit report, this will not be documented anywhere. And later on, if certain, risk comes out of those delay in recording the materials in time, and it is not getting reflected in a report, so who will be held responsible? Obviously, the internal auditor, because an internal auditor was appointed. The internal auditor had done a walkthrough of the process. He had gathered evidence. He had discussed it with the management, and no such issues had cropped up. So documentation is very, very important. If a certain point is at all to be excluded from the report, a written document from the management is to be obtained, on the basis of which the point is not appearing in the report, because then the auditor, the internal auditor, will have a documented record in his possession on which he can fall back later on if anything happens, if he is accused of negligence in his duties. So now, communication with the management. So communication with the management is very important. Why? At which stage should we communicate with the management? Anything we are not getting the documents from the process owners, should we report it to the management? Okay, we are not getting access to any particular area, should we report to the management? So it is very important that a proper communication channel established with the management and laying out the proper protocols. Who is responsible for what issues will be escalated to whom. So communication process and protocol. A process-based communication will stipulate all the key elements, that is protocol, mode. How do we communicate? Is it just a verbal mode or is it a written mode? Channel, timelines. How frequently should we communicate with the management? Content, again, whether it is going to be in the form of a document or a verbal, required for accurate, timely, and complete communication. Now, this is of vital importance when doing the internal audit. We may come across certain areas which are red flags, which needs immediate attention of the management. So in such a case, should we again wait for the laid down timelines and the protocols as laid down? No. In case of extreme emergencies, which warrants the immediate attention of the management, we should immediately communicate with the management. But such a thing ideally should also be covered when we are laying down the communication process and the protocols. A communication protocol will clarify who will communicate with whom. An article clerk cannot be expected to go and communicate matters of requiring the management intervention with the financial controller or the director of finance. So a communication protocol will clarify who will communicate with whom during the duration of the assignment, including escalations required for timely intervention. So escalation should be properly drafted. How the issue is supposed to be escalated. We are not getting access to any documents. Should we directly report to the director of finance now? Maybe we are going to go to the departmental heads or the departmental managers, and so we should know the mode or the channel of escalation required so that we can get timely information. Now, modes and channels of communication. The manner in which information is exchanged, that is verbal or written, picture or video, is the mode of communication. The medium used to exchange information, that is through phone or a hard copy paper, email, is the channel of communication. Now, what is the periodicity and timeline? The internal auditor, jointly in consultation with the management, shall determine the nature and the timing of the communication. It is necessary that certain matters are conveyed during or by a certain point in time of the internal audit. For example, a serious process lapse has been observed while carrying out a walkthrough of a process. Should we wait for the end of the audit to report that, or should we highlight immediately to the management so that timely action is taken to prevent any probable loss to the organization? Now, essential information for communication. The standards includes reference to information which is considered essential for conduct of the internal audit. Such communication requirements shall be noted for compliance in written form. So, there is a two-way communication with the management, either verbal or communication. There should be clarity regarding the scope, the appropriate and the objectives and the timing of the internal audit. We should inform and persuade the important matter which requires immediate attention of the management. And if there are some cases of conflicts, we should communicate with the management in proper time so that those conflicts get resolved. And channels of communications and escalations should be laid down. So now, we have almost come to the end of this series. So we have now come to drafting of the reports. So the plan has been laid down. We had gathered evidences. We had documented. We had communicated with the management. In between, we had reviewed and supervised. So now we are at the stage in which we are ready to arrive at the conclusion, that is reporting results. So reporting of internal audit results is usually undertaken in two stages. At the end of a particular audit assignment, an internal audit report covering a specific area, a function, or a part of the entity is prepared by the internal auditor, highlighting key observation arising from those assignments. Now, reporting may happen in two ways. It can be a report in which only the deviations are highlighted to the management. So ideally, this will depend upon what is the requirement of the management. This report is generally issued with details of the manner in which the assignment was conducted, defining the scope and the key findings from the audit procedures undertaken. Now, on a periodic basis, at the close of a planned period, a comprehensive report of all the internal audit activities covering the entity and the planned period is prepared by the chief internal auditor in-house or external party, that is the engagement partner. Such reporting is normally done on a quarterly basis and submitted to the highest governing authority, that is generally the audit committee. So, each internal audit report is prepared on the basis of the audit procedures, the evidence collected, analysis done, and the conclusions arrived at. No specific format of any internal audit report is laid down. It depends upon the internal auditor and the management. And the management action plans. If now there are certain areas which might require the intervention of the management. So in those cases, the management action plan needs to be countersigned where some control weaknesses have been highlighted. Now, where the internal audit is conducted in compliance with the standards of internal audit, and the internal auditor can substantiate the same with supporting evidence and documentations, the internal audit report shall include a statement confirming that the internal audit has been conducted in accordance with the standards of internal audit issued by the ICAI. So, content and format of the internal audit report. SIA does not mandate any particular format or list of contents, since the internal auditor is supposed to exercise his best professional judgment on matters on how to report and what to report. Okay. Now, monitoring, and the last of the series is very, very important. That is the monitoring and reporting of persistent irregularities. Now, what are those issues? Certain issues while carrying out of the internal audit will always be there, which requires a consistent follow-up and monitoring. So those are the persistent issues. So proper monitoring and closure of open issues from prior audits. So who is going to do the closure? The management is going to go do the closure based on the report of the internal auditor. Independent validation of corrective action taken by the auditor. This is very, very important. Some areas which might be highlighted in the internal audit report, the management might say that we have already taken corrective action on it. So please drop those points from the internal audit report. No, it is not sufficient. Please, we have to see that those corrective actions which the management warrants, which they are saying have been taken, has actually been done by the management, and only then a particular persistent irregularity shall be removed from the internal audit report after the satisfaction of the auditor. In case there are certain open issues which are still left, it needs to be escalated. Escalation of any concern in case of delays in closure of issues. And so those points will get featured in our internal audit report unless and until they get resolved. So with this, I conclude my presentation on today's topic. Thank you so much for a patient hearing.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Your deliberation was really great. And I would now like to take questions from the participants.
Yes.
This question is from Anand Kumar Bishi ji. And his question is, should exceptional, emergency, and important observation be put before the management immediately, and in which form? That is interim internal audit.
Yes. Certain areas, which we usually classify them as red flags, those should be brought to the immediate attention of the management, since it warrants immediate attention of the management to prevent, further loss of the organization. Yes.
Okay. Ma'am, I am getting a common request for you from the participants that if you can share your presentation with them.
Yeah, I think I have already given my presentation to the institute. So I think you can share it with them if you want.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you so much. And there are no further questions.
Okay.
So I would like to conclude. And I extend a sincere gratitude to you, ma'am, for gracing our today's webinar with your expertise and captivating insights. Your deliberation was remarkable, ma'am, and we are truly grateful for your contribution.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all the participants for their patient hearings. Good night.
Okay, ma'am. I extend my deepest gratitude and appreciation to each member of this board for their commitment, meticulous planning, and dedication for organizing this insightful webinar. Thank you once again for being an integral part of the webinar. We hope to have the privilege of collaborating with you again in the future. Thank you all the participants.